Three. Hello, we are joined today by with Rob Beste of the Assistant General Manager of the Water Replenishment District of Southern California, the district that Felicia Marcus called the best kept secret in California. But Rob's going to blow the secret and tell us about what goes on there. He's worked in the field of water resources, engineering, operation, and planning for longer than he cares to admit, has a wide-ranging experience with water supply and distribution infrastructure. As I mentioned, he's the assistant GM, and Water Replenishment District is the regional groundwater agency that manages and provides half of the total demand for water to nearly 4 million residents across 43 cities within southern Los Angeles County. Prior to WRD, Rob was the Public Works Director for the City of Torrance and the City of Beverly Hills, and was in charge of municipal water systems for each city. So take it away, Rob. You can grab the screen again and tell us all the interesting things going on in WRD.
All righty. Thanks, Dennis. I'm going to do the share. Let's see if I get this. Okay. Okay, how's that?
Great.
All righty. Okay, well, thanks again, Dennis. And as he said, I'm Rob Beste. I'm with the Water Replenishment District. And here's a map of our service area that Dennis was just describing. We're a fairly large area. It covers, once again, 420 square miles in these 43 cities. Population in this area is a little over 4 million. And this area in Southern California uses about 500,000 acre feet of water a year, of which, as Dennis pointed out, about 50% of that is groundwater. It's hard to believe, but in Southern California, there is quite a bit of groundwater usage here. Right now, for the rest of the usage, not for our replenishment, but just for general purposes, most of the other water is imported from either the Colorado River or the State Water Project, and that's through the Metropolitan Water District. So, what project we're talking about today, though, is our regional Brackish program in our West Coast Basin. Back in the 30s and 40s in our area, there was a lot of groundwater pumping throughout the basin. And as a result, similar to several areas in California, there is seawater intrusion into those local aquifers. By that overpumping caused probably, we estimate it at a little over 350,000 acre feet or so of brackish water that's been in the basin. And it's not just staying in one place. It does migrate, and it's kind of moving in a southeasterly direction right now, which is really opposite to the natural flow of water, which would flow kind of from the mountains to the north and either south or kind of southwest, and push that water out to the ocean. In fact, back in the early days, a lot of our area was artesian, and there's a lot of groundwater in the area. So looking at these graphs, what we're doing is in the middle of the graph here, you can see we're pulling out this brackish water. We have a series of injection wells, and let me go back real quick to this. We have a series of injection wells that go along the West Coast basin here. And it's this yellow line that's I'm kind of pointing to right here. And what we're doing is we inject fresh water into the basin. And actually, all of this is advanced treated recycled water at this point. There is some imported water that gets in just due to hydraulic issues, but the majority of it is advanced treated water. At that point, wells inland of this plume extract groundwater, and that's what's being used by all of our pumpers. So what we're doing is we're looking at taking this brackish area and removing as much of the salt as possible. And part of our mission not only is to replenish the basins, but it's also to clean up the basins. By doing so, we can have our pumpers utilize their rights. We are adjudicated. So both our basins, the West and Central Basin, are adjudicated. So different pumpers have a certain amount of rights that they can use. And essentially they are allowed to pump up to those rights, and we charge them what we call the replenishment assessment. And we supplement whatever natural water doesn't fill up the basins with these various amounts of recycled water. What this will do, though, is once we remove that brackish plume, is that area will be filled with advanced treated recycled water, which is really a new potable water supply for the region. The kind of remediation allows for more storage space also. And in Southern California, there are some very large plans right now to treat more recycled water at both. There's an MWD plant in Carson, and also just north of this area at the Hyperion plant for the city of Los Angeles. Their goal is to essentially treat all of that water to advanced treated water standards and then put into various aquifers. And our aquifer is one of the first that they can put it into. So once again, the plume could be about 375,000 acre feet. And we look at this as everything over 500 milligrams of chloride, trying to basically make it so it meets the drinking water standards. The majority of pumping is in our Silverado aquifer, which is the middle, and it's a little bit less amount there. We do have some in the lower San Pedro. We'll probably do this project in phases and just target kind of mostly this San Pedro or Silverado, sorry, and somewhat the Gage aquifer up here. And then in future years, probably target that lower San Pedro aquifer. So why is this project important to our region? This basin, the West Coast Basin, I don't know why it keeps clicking. West Coast Basin has about 64,000 acre feet of rights. And if you look over on the right-hand side here, there's quite a few rights not being pumped at this time. And various reasons, but a lot of it is accessibility to well locations and that brackish plume. When you look at the cost components of taking out water, essentially a pumper will do minimal treatment to the water because it's a pretty good quality. But if there's salt in it and you have to do a reverse osmosis process, the cost doesn't make sense compared to imported water. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to be doing that treatment and paying that differential to get that water cleaned up so that the pumping community can use those additional rights. And we'd like to see all the rights being used. And that's our goal. So to develop this program, it started quite a few years ago, really a program of this size. We have quite a few stakeholders, the kind of the local cities and the local private agencies. We started back in 2017 with stakeholder meetings. We got a Prop 1 grant to help out the process, and we've been through the feasibility study that we kind of finished up, and now we're on to kind of the next phase, which is looking at doing a piloting. But the feasibility study gave us a lot of information. We were able to hone down a variety of different size projects. We looked at targeting which aquifer to do first. We looked at the historical pumping rights. We looked at facility siting. One of the key things that we're going to have to do is discharge brine. Any RO plant obviously creates a brine, and that's in our area is difficult to deal with. One of the things that we have been doing quite a bit so far is sending our brines to our wastewater treatment plants. But since that is now the source of water, we really don't want to do that because it's really adding to the salt load that has to be treated then. So it really doesn't make sense. So we're looking at brine discharge as being one of the key components. And then obviously, what makes sense to connect to the potable systems in the area. This plant is located in the city of, will be located in the city of Torrance. The stakeholders in that include West Basin, Cal Water, City of Manhattan Beach, Los Angeles Department of Water, City of Lomita, and Golden State. All serve in this area, but the plant itself would be in the city of Torrance. So once again, I'm not going to go through all this, but you can see we looked at a variety of different size plants and different locations and configurations to see, you know, kind of what would be feasible, and trying to hone in on just a few of the projects to get a cost per acre foot that's somewhat in the ballpark of, like I said, with our subsidy would be so that people can purchase water around the imported water cost, which is through the Metropolitan Water District. So the analysis on the short list, we looked at our operations and maintenance requirements, the power supply. We looked at permitting, environmental review we'd need, entitlements, project costs, delivery alternatives. We looked at the range of things anybody would do with a project to really to see how we would go about it. And here's what we came down to. The plant is probably going to start out at something in the 10 to 12,000 acre foot range. And a lot of that's due to what the purveyors can use at this time. For instance, City of Los Angeles would like to take up to 10,000 acre feet of water, but they need to do some work on their system. So that will take a few years for them to do. So we're looking at really a range of 10 to 12,000 acre feet up to 20,000 acre feet. And to get to that 20,000 acre foot number, it's kind of interesting because that's going to require the Hyperion treatment plant in the city of Los Angeles to really produce water. But they're thinking that that can produce up to 150,000 acre feet a year. So there would be a large supply of water coming from that plant, which obviously easily could be used for replenishment in our basin. So once again, that's kind of the range. On capacity, we're looking at up to 11 extraction wells, probably a centralized desalter. We actually have another desalter in the area called the Goldsworthy desalter. We're really thinking now of linking the two in a variety of ways, both with source water and for production purposes. It'll be interesting to see what comes down in the final plan. But as we look at the basin and we look at that amount of salt that you can pull out of the different areas, it does vary. And so we're going to look at all the different blends we can do based on utilizing both plants. There was that one little piece farther north in Manhattan Beach that might be a separate desalter. It just doesn't make sense to tie it to the centralized one because just from a distance standpoint. Treatment technology will probably be reverse osmosis with disinfection, typical of what we're doing at Goldsworthy right now. Once again, the plume and where it's located geographically is mostly in the city of Torrance. So we do have a preferred site picked out at this point. Environmentally, there's really not real environmental impacts. In fact, we've been doing this same type of process in the Goldsworthy plant now for 20 years. Basically, we extract water that is too salty and we inject water that's fit for drinking. So it's been a tried and true system here. To do replenishment, though, it's kind of interesting. We get replenishment at the barriers, but we're also looking at maybe doing some inland injection now. And I've got a graphic in a little bit here that'll show you some options that we have to do inland injection. And kind of our goal is to keep that plume from migrating farther east. We want to kind of push it back and basically extract it where it's at. I talked about the brine solution. Maybe if you go south towards City of Carson, the joint plant has an outfall there, and we would want to maybe get our brine to not go to the plant, but go to the outfall itself, which has an outfall to the ocean. So project costs, once again, our range of project costs could be, in the $1,000 to $1,300 acre foot at the smallest, but we're looking at ways to reduce the cost. Imported water in our area, though, is really at about, it's almost close to 1,500 acre foot. And over the period of time, it'll be quite a bit more than that. So from a cost standpoint, the project actually already does make sense. So here's a little graphic of those purple dots here are where we're looking at some well sites, kind of overlaying it with the where the plume is. You can see where that line that says the Goldsworthy desalter, that's where the first desalter is. The yellow box is at the transit center, which is just outside the plume, but our wells would probably be at that leading edge of the plume, and that's where we're targeting. So next steps, we got to work on the site itself, develop some project renderings. We got to see how much of a site we really want, and part of it is how expandable do we want it to be. Obviously, different footprint for a 10,000 acre foot site compared to a 20,000 acre foot site. So we are going to look at that. Big look is at the replenishment sources. We're working with our partner agencies, West Basin, LADWP, MWD. We'll buy water from any of those facilities. And we're going to actually probably work with them to expand some of their capacity to provide us more water. We're going to do a pilot study, drill a few pilot wells in some of the salty areas. Part of it is this area actually has a lot of organics. So really when it comes to your RO technology, you really want to know what your source water is. We probably will have to do some pre-treatment, probably some activated carbon for pre-treatment on that, and then the reverse osmosis. And once again, we're looking at that brine discharge. And, this is an interesting thing because actually with the Goldsworthy, we have an exemption to extract water not using rights. We are actually looking at utilizing water rights with our various agencies. And we're doing that because then whatever the salt content is, this plant will probably run long after WRD is actually involved in it. Probably turn over to an agency, one of the agencies, or maybe they'll form a JPA or some type of entity to run the plant in the future, because once the infrastructure is in place and the wells are working and the site's working, it can run indefinitely. But our goal is really just to clean up, and that's why we're part of the project. So just quick look at the site. We're looking at, you can see where the Goldsworthy plant is on the left. This site is at a transit center. This site is showing about a 2.6 acre site. We're not quite sure how much of that we need, but there's actually some infrastructure that can get the source water there pretty easily. So it's works out well, and this could be a site that works. A little more close up of the site. This 208 Street doesn't exist, and it's kind of in construction now. Actually, where the dirt is, there's a new transit center going in Torrance, so this would kind of be behind that. So, and then I talked about the replenishment aspect, and probably should have had this slide a little earlier, but number one represents that Hyperion, and really the city of LA's goal right now is to recycle 100% of their water. They don't want any water going out to the ocean. So that plant can produce up to maybe 150,000 acre feet a year. That number three next to it is an Ed C. Little plant that's run by West Basin, and they actually get their source water from Hyperion. They've been operating for many years though, and that can be expanded to produce more water. And then if you look down at number 2 down there, that's the joint plant that MWD is looking at. And the LA County Sanitation runs a large sewer treatment plant there. And that's MWD is looking at that for once again, an advanced water treatment plant to produce similar size to that Hyperion, over 150,000 acre feet of water a year. So these are the next new sources of water in LA, is these advanced water treatment plants. So trying to limit the amount of Colorado River and or imported state water project water. These 3 sources will be a key part to the future of Los Angeles. Here's just a quick timeline. We're kind of getting the pilot study probably done by the end of 2023. We're going to be solidifying agreements with our partners. And once we sign agreements, we really can go full steam ahead. We really just have to acquire those rights and make sure that everybody's on board with the project. The numbers seem to pencil out. And once we get all those in place, we'll continue from piloting into, a design phase. So we're full speed ahead on this project. And as long as everything works, should be doing some more brackish water desalination in Southern California. With that.
Well, yes, thanks, Rob. I did have just a couple questions that kind of came up. One is about desalters, and admittedly, in my various bubbles that I'm in, I don't really have a great sense in terms of desal, kind of things. I mean, so there's always been the issue, with ocean desal as far as energy usage, and with brackish desal and the source water, you would hear that it's like 1% of the salt of the seawater or some kind of percentage like that, which would be, and therefore be relatively more easy, if not very, easy to treat, I guess on the continuum of things. I wonder if you can address that in terms of, say the brackish water versus seawater as far as getting the salts down to an acceptable
Yeah, sure.
level.
Yeah, so ocean desal, you're talking 34 parts or 34,000 parts of salt there, compared to our deepest is probably in the 5,000 range. A lot of it is probably closer to 1,500-ish and down. And then as it gets cleaned up, it'll get less and less. So it does become an energy usage equation there, because you have to use more pressure and more pumps to push the saltier water through, because you're going to extract more salt. The other thing about it, though, is, in our area and in probably all of California, is the environmental considerations of, I think there's a lot of opposition to ocean desal, and there's absolutely no opposition to brackish desal, especially when the replenishment is from recycled water sources. And so that's really where I think the environmental community is going also. So it really makes sense in getting a project pushed forward to continue to look at the brackish plumes that are, in California, not just our area, other parts of California too. Especially as long as you can have a source of replenishment that's sustainable. And that's what we have going on.
On the plumes, just characterizing the plumes themselves, I was thinking, when you were describing them, I was thinking of a little further south with Orange County Water District and their lab, and they were going, this is, last year we had Mike Marcus on, and it was just when they were, looking and coming to some conclusions about PFOS. And, they had closed down like 17 wells at one point because of, PFOS contamination. And so how would you characterize these particular plumes? I know in it's like Sunnyvale and Mountain View, for instance, where it used to be, where Silicon Valley got its name, uh,
Mhm.
was the chip fab stuff. And there
And
are
Moffett Field and
plumes like in Moffett Field, right? And
yeah.
they cause some problems. They still cause problems, and there are actually some interesting remediation, phyto remediation things that are going on there. But anyway, I just wondered how you'd characterize the plumes that you've mapped out here, and are there other maps of other plumes?
Yeah, that's a different presentation. If you want that one, you got to wait till next. Yes.
Is that extra? Huh?
That's actually no. I can switch over to the presentation if you want to. We actually so in the West Coast Basin, we actually don't have a PFOS issue. The West Coast Basin, the aquifers have really well-defined aquatards that prevent pollution from getting down into the drinking water aquifers. So there is some PFOS up by Los Angeles, LAX, but it's really on the surface and it's not water that we use. PFOS comes from firefighting and a variety of water repellent type things, and it's in nature. We actually do have a PFOS issue similar to Orange County. It's in. If I go back up to our little basin map. So if you look up where it says the Albert Robles Center up on the far right up here, that's our forebay area. And we do have PFOS that's in that area. And it is found in the two rivers that come through that area. And we do have spreading basins that capture stormwater, and it comes from the stormwater. Like I say, over the years of firefighting, things like that, there is some amount of PFOS that is in the wastewater streams up in that area. It's the amount, though, that's in that is below the current RLs that are out in California. So while it's a component of it, it's still a very small amount. When you do reverse osmosis treatment, you remove PFOS, so it's not in that water source, but it is in the up in that Pico Rivera area. We do spread tertiary water also, and there is some PFOS in that. Like I say, the amounts coming out nowadays are below the RL levels that are required. So that said, we do have a program with our pumpers in that area to provide funding for PFOS remediation. And basically, there are several pumpers in that area affected. Not so much, once again, in the West Coast Basin at all, but up in that Pico Rivera area, several of the pumpers are affected. And we are in fact, we just signed our first agreement with Pico Water District to provide funding for treatment. And treatment for PFOS is typically either granular activated carbon or ion exchange are the two that most agencies are using. You can use reverse osmosis. It's just expensive. It doesn't make sense for that application. So we do have that problem to some extent. Orange County has a little bit different area because they did have it affecting about half their pumpers. We currently have about 14 pumpers affected out of our 80 pumpers or so. So it's really concentrated into that upper northeast area.
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, anyway, it's great to hear. Now, in terms of your brine evacuation, that's pretty much all ocean dilution at this point?
Well, that's what we're hoping. Right now, our plants, both the Albert Robles Center and the Goldsworthy, actually send brine to the sewage treatment plants.
Mm-hmm.
That's just been the infrastructure costs are pretty, it's significant for the amount of flow. as you start building these bigger plants, though, this is something that we're going to really have to look at. And in fact, we're working right now with the county sanitation district to look at maybe building a joint line to carry that to the ocean, to attach to one of their outfalls after their plant. Even though we're doing desalinization, the amount of salt we're creating is far less than the ocean is. It's saltier, but it's not as salty as the ocean still. So, but that is a cost, and sending that saltier water back to the system doesn't make any sense. So we do need to deal with the brine issue, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to also work with the regulatory community and the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very big topic, and just in terms of the Bay Area as well, because there isn't that much in terms of ocean stuff. It's all pipes within the bay, and so actually some of the things with a recent thing with the Valley Water is building to further treat Palo Alto water. It's like tertiary treated, and it's too salty pretty much for most plant life, but not salty enough for the bay.
Yeah.
And so it's in this uncomfortable middle area. It could kill trees, but it isn't really even that beneficial for the bay. So, but actually now it's a good source water for further treatment and possible drinking water.
Yeah, and we don't have a bay like San Francisco Bay.
Yeah, no, obviously.
When you send it out to the ocean, Pacific Ocean's pretty large. So
yeah, and it is impressive actually. Just looking at the barrier maps, because there is that's such a thing as far as the seawater intrusion, and having water that you would pump back. I saw something, I think, in the presentation that mentioned, well, in terms of the treatment of water, there was mention of something like 600,000 acre feet. I know, it's something out of context, I know, but I was even comparing that with the usage currently of 550.
Yeah, we have storage space in this area that's probably 400,000 to 600,000 acre feet. Who knows? So there's a fair amount of storage that's available in this area, and that's really kind of how we're anticipating most of the. We would like or encourage the water agencies to be able to do more pumping, and we actually amended our adjudication back in 2014 to allow for extraction of stored water. Actually, previous to that, if you put water in, that was great, but you get sued if you tried to take out anything more than your rights. So now we have the ability to have pumpers store water and then extract at a later date. Because of, we do have these new sources of water. We're going to really be working over the next few years to figure out where to put that water. And it's really not, WRD is just here to facilitate. This really is kind of partnerships between the Metropolitan Water District, City of Los Angeles, LADWP, and then the other pumpers and water purveyors in the region. We're here just to facilitate that usage. And actually, you did point out our barriers. We do have 3 barriers that we operate: the West Coast barrier on the left, the Dominguez Gap barrier, which is fed by LA Water and Power recycled water, and then the Alamedas barrier on the far right, lower part. And we actually have another advanced water treatment plant that we operate there called our Leo J. Vanderland's plant, and we provide recycled water to that. So we're pretty pleased to say that all of our replenishment really comes from recycled water sources. We're not buying imported water currently for spreading, for sure. And like I say, the imported water we do buy is just from incidentally for operational when there's source water issues or things like that. So we're getting to the point where we're really 100% off of imported water, groundwater
Yeah.
replenishment purposes.
Well, this is really interesting to hear, and really interesting to learn more about the water replenishment district. I mean, it looks like you're, developing a lot of, basically solutions, and then, attacking problems of the day, or, obviously it takes years, but then almost looking to turn it over, do the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And then go on to other challenges. So it's quite an interesting organization, and gives credence to Felicia Marcus's assessment. So anyway,
Well,
thanks. Thanks for.
I was just gonna say, we do impact a lot of people.
What's that?
We do impact a lot of people. They just don't know. They just don't know it.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And but this is it looks like you're doing a lot of there's a lot of forethought in tackling some of these issues, and doing the development and the going through all the studies and things to kind of take care of these problems, and then maybe letting the utilities that are maybe have more of an O&M kind of mindset to just keep them humming. So anyway,
Okay.
thanks.
So,
Thanks for this late entry into Waterpalooza. We will be telling all the people on the interwebs about it in the next few days.
sounds good. Thanks.
All righty. Thank you, Rob.